we want? What do we want? When do we want it? When do we want it? When do we want it? Hug the person next to you and let them know that you're glad that they are an African. If any white folks are in, report them to Brother Abdul. With my deepest apologies. Professor Amos Wilson. All right, all right. Welcome to the fourth in a series of lectures that I deem extremely important. Of course, it's not 7:30 yet, as we promised. Chief Imhotep Gary Bird is still on time. However, because there's so much to discuss, and because we have so many dynamic speakers, and because we want to give them an opportunity to stretch out, I'm going to take prerogative of using only the time that I normally am accorded to just sort of heat this place up in terms of global white supremacy. Let me say that within the last 24 hours, something significant happened that illustrates the notion of global white supremacy. Certainly, one of the great needs in our community here in this country is to have a pathologist on duty at all times, because strange things are happening to black people momentarily and prematurely. The revelation yesterday and the death today of Reginald Lewis, I think, clearly points out that there are some mysterious drugs and other paraphernalia that apparently is not detectable by the naked eye that is knocking us over. We should be absolutely alarmed, each one of us, as to the ease in which they can knock us off. Bloodless killings. No gunshots, no knives, just somebody keel over. Certainly Harold Washington was one of those killings of black leadership that would not bend, buckle, and bow. Reginald Lewis was not Harold Washington in no real respect of the word. We want to make that clear. But you don't really have to be in Harold Washington to be an endangered person in America. Reginald Lewis entered in the secret societies of white supremacy. And he ultimately had to pay for it. It demonstrates to anybody here in this country that there are no opportunities for black folks. I don't care who you are. I don't care how clean you keep your nose. There's only two relationships that black folks can enjoy, if you call that enjoyment, and that as being either a servant in a master-servant relationship or an agent. Only two kinds of relationships. Reginald Lewis sought to become a partner in global white supremacy. And it was off limits to him. Now, how did this come about? A few weeks ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who is engaged in high finance. And he had just come back, and we were engaging in a conversation, and it got to Reginald Lewis and Michael Milliken. A lot of people are not aware of why Michael Milliken was put in jail. There are various books out that deal with some aspects of this, but this is very important for us to begin understanding global white supremacy. Michael Milliken was summoned, and this is just not me talking, this is part my investigation and part my reliance on my friend who certainly has the credentials in this area. Michael Milliken was summoned to the offices of the aristocratic Jews in America. And they brought him in because he had violated one of the rules of white supremacy. These members of the ruling class informed him, Chief Imhotep Gary Bird, let's give him a big hand. Gary, I'm just sort of warming this up for a minute. But you still in charge because you still the chief. But we just wanted to run through some things real quick before you got here. Because certainly nobody can get us started better than Gary. And I even said that when I stood up. Am I right? You can't get in trouble with the chief. So I bear witness that I told everybody that I just wanted to say a few things early. But they informed Reginald Lewis that they had two problems. First one, they might be able to live with. The second one, they could not live with. As you know, Jews are into a class structure. Negroes try to imitate them. Y'all know that. And Milliken was told that there were two things that he could not do. One, he could not bring lower class Jews into the aristocracy. And that's what he was doing with junk bonds. And secondly, they had a real serious problem with his assistants that allowed Reginald Lewis to take over Beatrice Foods. And because Milliken would not renege on his commitments to Lewis and to many other Jews that he had helped buy out all of these corporations, which was threatening the WASP. Because the Jews said, look, we already got a nice thing going on in America. We don't want to blow it. You are messing things up. And because Milliken refused to go back on his commitments, he was indicted. Much of this is in the Den of Thieves, book by James Stewart. Milliken, after getting indicted, tried to improve his image in the black community in New York City because he was going to be tried in Manhattan. And so he then contacted Bill Tatum and Percy Sutton, according to the Den of Thieves, to attempt to improve his image because obviously many of the jurors were going to be black. And he felt as though he could be saved with blacks on the jury because we are the most fair-minded people in the world. Well, anyway, he eventually pled guilty. And as many of you know now, he just recently was put into a halfway house. So it's very interesting at a time that he was getting ready to come back out of jail that Reginald Lewis dies mysteriously. But I think that what that really points out is that in this country, there are certain groups where black folks need not apply. That's nothing new to us. The barriers of the 50s and 60s where white folks had signs saying you need not apply still exists in the 90s. A few years ago, many of you may remember Crazy Joe Gallo. Crazy Joe Gallo did time in the penitentiary, came out, and decided that he was going to integrate the mob. Right now he's pumping daisies. It began to point out how serious this whole thing is about the ruling class, white supremacy. Because in both Milliken's case and in Gallo's case, they sought to violate that in order to bring about opportunities for blacks. And in each instance, it did not work. And so I think tonight that somebody should seriously examine the body of Reginald Lewis. Because I doubt very seriously that a man within 24 hours just expires from the face of the earth. To begin this very briefly, I want to read this passage out of a magazine called American Demographics. American Demographics is a monthly magazine that studies populations and population profiles. Now that's very important because the one thing that white people are concerned about is population and population profile. Demographics is one area that they study very studiously. This article addresses the tastes and preferences of blacks in America. And it starts off reading this. For African Americans, the die was cast nearly 400 years ago. Their ancestors' sale into slavery still shapes their actions, attitudes, interests, and choices today. The first black Americans came from different tribes and different regions of Africa. They did not speak the same languages, and they were often separated from their families when they entered this country. Blacks didn't come to America seeking opportunity. They were the opportunity. Let me read that again. The last sentence anyway. Blacks didn't come to America seeking opportunity. They were the opportunity. This is in the current issue of American Demographics. And it talks about various tastes and preferences of black people. And in many ways, it seemed to be somewhat accurate. But what is interesting is this whole notion about opportunity. And when it talks about we didn't come here to seek opportunity, we were the opportunity. And we still are the opportunity. When people from Eastern Europe and Germany and Israel talk about coming to America, they are talking about coming to Harlem and Bed-Stuy and the South Bronx, because you are still the opportunity. And you are the opportunity because of the way that you spend your money. That's why you are the opportunity, because of the way that you spend your money. You are not investing your money. You are not saving your money. You are spending foolishly your money and spending it with someone who does not look like you. So when we began to look at this whole notion of white supremacy, and black people today say, well, we need the Marshall Plan. Everybody who has the Urban League always talk about the Marshall Plan. Well, they put the Marshall Plan in effect in black America in 1950. At the same time, they were putting it in effect in Europe. Because the purpose of the market plan was not to rebuild economies. The purpose of the market plan was to control markets all over the world. And white folks control black markets thoroughly. And it is that struggle for black markets which is at the core of white supremacy. The struggle for black market, the struggle for Asian markets, the struggle for Indian markets, the struggle for Latin American markets is at the core of this whole notion of white supremacy. Well, what is interesting about this article is that while white people are acknowledging that our die has already been cast, according to them, that we've already been irreparably harmed, according to them, Congressman Conyers has introduced a reparations bill into Congress, not demanding reparations, but asking white Congress to determine if we are entitled to reparations. Now, white folks, by this article, this is the ruling class, has admitted that your die has already been cast and that your behavior today is a direct product of your being kidnapped and exploited for over 400 years. And the only thing that our leadership is doing is asking white folks to study whether we are in fact entitled to reparations. And then, if we are entitled to reparations, it should be set in a fund and not given to us individually. If we are entitled to reparations, totally contrary to the way that Jews from Germany are receiving their reparations. All right? Totally contrary to the way the Japanese just got theirs. All right? Totally contrary to all of that. So I submit tonight that we are faced with hopeless leadership in the black community. One of the reasons why Hitler went to war was because of reparations. Reparations were imposed on Hitler during World War I. And he said that I will never be a slave. And so he said that the German people were superior to all races, including other whites. a notion of racial superiority. Wasn't just global white supremacy. It was global German white supremacy. And so Hitler went to war to deal with that. So when we began to talk about global white supremacy, the term global takes on a special meaning because everything today is global. Global markets, global trade, global banking, and global peacekeeping forces. Going into countries like Somalia under, quote, humanitarian purposes. But the essence of white supremacy, global white supremacy, the essence of it is one belief system. That's the essence of white supremacy, one belief system. In order for white supremacy to succeed, we must believe that white folks are superior in order for white supremacy to succeed. We are controlled by our beliefs. We are controlled by our beliefs. 1492 was a great year for Europeans. It wasn't just a great year because, quote, they discovered America. It was a great year because their belief systems were shattered in 1492. The one thing that kept white predators from ravaging all of the world before then was the fact that they believed that the world was flat. And therefore they would refuse to go out too far from shore. And so the rest of the world was safe. The rest of the world was safe because of their false beliefs. And it was only when, during the Moors period, that they began to get word that Africans was traveling all over the world, that Columbus said, that's interesting. And then went to the king and queen and said, well, maybe we can go out a little further than normal. And the rest is history. And therefore, in order to control us, they recognized that they must instill in us a false belief system. The same false belief system that had imprisoned them until Christopher Columbus destroyed the myth that the world was flat. Africans knew for centuries that the world was round and traveled all over. But it was only the belief systems of Europeans that defeated Europeans. And that is why they engage in propaganda to the day. And that is why Carter G. Woodson wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. Because as long as our beliefs about the world and about the white man were false, I don't care how many guns you bring us, we cannot be liberated. So there's no substitute for knowledge. There's no substitute. Men are in fear because of a lack of knowledge. And so when we began to look at the American, the British, the French, and all of these white empires, we initially began to look at colonial rule. And certainly Dr. Clarke, in many of his lectures, has talked about colonial rule, and certainly may talk about it tonight. But white people are ruling countries today from long distances. In fact, they're ruling communities like ours and not even in the community. And got us under check. How can somebody control us by remote control? We got more Negro leaders today than we ever had. And we're in worse shape. Africa is free of many whites and it's in bad shape. How can the white man just abandon colonial rule and still firmly control countries and communities without his presence? Well, the answer really can be answered in many respects over the lives of Dr. King and Malcolm X. There are many things about their lives that we may have skirted. The reason why I watch the GBE, listen to the GBE every day, is because it's a great educational forum with Gary Bird. And today, Gary had a question about letter from a Birmingham jail, 1963. In fact, I believe it was April 16th. Maybe I might get a book, Gary, for giving the month and the date. Letter from a Birmingham jail. But what that really talked about was unjust laws. And both King and Malcolm had the same goals in mind. But their tactics were different. When Malcolm talked about civil rights and human rights, when King talked about just laws and unjust laws, they were talking about the same thing. They just had different consequences. Malcolm believed that if his rights were not respected, he had a right to self-defense. King believed that you should submit to your authority. But their goals were the same. Neither one of them believed in complying with unjust laws. And Malcolm talked about human rights rather than civil rights. And this posed a problem for white America. That right there posed a problem. And that's why Malcolm and Martin had to die. Because in order to be a ruler, you have to formulate rules. That's the essence of being a ruler. That's why they call it a ruler, because a ruler has the power and the ability to define and implement rules. And so when we look at global white supremacy, we have gone from a period of colonial rule to a period of constitutional rule. Listen. We have gone from a period of colonial rule to a period of constitutional rule. And that is why African countries are in sync today. Since 1965, that's the year that Malcolm was assassinated. Since 1965, 3/4 of the world's constitution were drafted. Since 1965. And they were drafted by white America. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, for example, was drafted by a Mr. Blumstein, professor at Rutgers University. Bangladesh was drafted by America. You know what kind of shape Bangladesh is in today. Liberia Constitution was drafted by America. If you look at South Africa, they are making the same mistake. They are sitting down with these white supremacists talking about drafting a constitution. You've been under the Constitution for about 128 years, and you haven't gone nowhere. Nowhere. And every time you get in trouble, you talk your constitutional rights. That's why you're in trouble, because of the Constitution. always driving onto something that is in fact designed to oppress you. The strength of white people is in their ability to formulate and implement rules. That's their strength. Every rule that you live under in America is drafted by white folks. Every one. You can't name me a black rule that you live under. Every rule. Every rule that you live under. You are thoroughly enslaved. 100% enslaved. Because of rules. And so what happened? The Ford Foundation. All right, let's listen now, because we're going to go through this rather fast. You got to do some research when you leave here. The Ford Foundation went through Africa and set up law schools and trained Africans how to enforce the rules against their people. And this is why you won't see Hitler oppressing you no more. Negroes have been trained to oppress. Ford Foundation is one of those. The United Nations set of rules formulated by white folks. The Permanent Security Council members are all white except China. And China knows that it cannot afford to get out of line. And it's going along with everything that America has called for. Because they wrote the rules. They in Somalia tonight killing people under their rules. In Iraq tonight killing people under their rule. It is the rule that has embedded us. So why was Malcolm and King dangerous? Because they said ignore those rules. You can't beat somebody playing by their rules. You elect somebody to Congress, he gets in there and says, well, I'm going to wait 20 years before I get my seniority. Then I'll make my move. That's what the rules say. 19 years afterward, the Negro kills over. Mysterious death. And we've blown 20 years waiting on him to benefit from a rule. That's what's happening out here. Rules. One time somebody wrote an article and said Maddox played by his own rules. You're mighty right. Anytime I got anybody out of jail, I had to set up my own rules. Play guerrilla warfare. You can't beat somebody with their rules. Can't go into court and defend somebody with their rules. This is why Malcolm and King were dangerous. And when you read the letter from a Birmingham jail, King talks about being unwilling to live with unjust laws. Whatever you may think about King, you at least got to give him that. You at least got to give him that. And that's a big difference. White people have demonstrated by evidence, I'm not into a propaganda campaign tonight, that they are environmental predators. And that they engage in environmental terrorism and in environmental exploitation. If someone rewrote the history of whites on this planet, they would have to conclude that they were anti-nature. Anti-nature in everything that they do. They are set on destroying nature. And it is for that reason that they have set up these spaceships so they can get out of here. before everything goes up. Because at some point they plan to blow this bad boy up with us on it. Anybody that bring cattle and breed them and bring human beings and breed them is anti-nature. Anybody that tamper with reproduction systems is anti-nature. Nature. Anybody that destroys the environment, pollute the rivers, global warming is anti-nature. And they carry beasts that are anti-nature. The cow is the greatest animal on the world against nature. Wherever the cow is, there's soil erosion. That's how they killed the Native Americans. They introduced the cow to the West. And the cow grazed so much grass that the buffalo could not sustain themselves. And they brought them out there intentionally because the cow is a beast and is a weapon of white folks. And the buffalo died. Those that they couldn't kill could not sustain themselves because there was no grass. Because of the cow. So everything that we are looking at is conclusions. Demonstrates that this man is anti-nature in every respect. This is why when Clarence Thomas was being considered for the Supreme Court, there was only one thing the white folks was concerned about in Clarence's life. It wasn't Anita Hill. It wasn't that white woman he's married to. The only thing that white folk were concerned about was his views on natural law. That's the only thing they were concerned about. What are your real views on natural law? What do you know natural law to mean? Because white folks are against nature. That's why they're against you. Because you're the greatest fertilizers in the world. Nobody fertilized better than you. So you either got to be put in check or they got to come up with artificial fertilizers to replace you. That's what we're talking about. Just a few more brief things. We are having some real difficulties with Clinton. All right? The election of Bill Clinton was a Machiavellian move. How many of you are familiar with the book The Prince? Well, there's a passage in The Prince that was torn out for Bill Clinton. You see, Clinton was not of the noble class. Nobility rules the world. But sometimes the slaves of the world get restless when they see so much injustice and can be only pacified when somebody who is not noble is elected to office. Because then the slaves feel like they may have a shot too. And that's in the book The Prince. It talks about when times get so chaotic and the people get so restless, then you must move away from the noble class and elect somebody who is a peon in order to pacify the masses of people. And so in July of 1990, they held the presidential elections for America. Did y'all hear me? In July of 1990, they convened and elected the next president. Of course, is there anybody who believes that even by law that you can elect a president? Even by law it says you can't elect a president. All right? So there's nothing wrong with the slaveholders holding a meeting in July of 1990. The slaveholders are the bondholders. That meeting took place in July of 90. And they said that the S&L crisis and this junk bond mess and the leverage buyouts and all of this stuff that was making the rich richer and the poor poorer was causing problems among the masses. That we were making too much money and they were catching on to us. And they said that although Bush is a chameleon, the masses caught him changing colors. And he could be of no further use to the ruling class. And so they put him out then. That's the reason why Bush enticed Saddam Hussein to go into Kuwait in August of 1990. Because Bush was trying to make an end run around the rulers of the world and tried to galvanize the masses of people and show the rulers that the people were still behind them. For a moment, it looked as though he was going to succeed. But the election was too far off. And the ruling class could not take a chance for 4 more years of Bush because of the possibilities of a revolution. And so as a result of that, this white cracker, this Dixiecrat from Arkansas, who had been chosen in 1963 as a potential presidential candidate. White folks are not like us. You are looking back to 1965 to try to figure out who killed Malcolm. White folks are already plotting 2050. That's a big difference. You cannot defeat somebody looking backwards when they're already plotting 2050. They already know, according to their methods, what you're going to be doing in 2050. Exactly how many of you will be here in 2050. If you want to undo your situation, you got to go to 2,100 right now and get ahead of them. If you are behind, you got to score more points. Am I right? In order to get ahead. So that's our predicament now. They are not looking backwards. They had already figured out 1992 in 1962. And they knew who was possibly going to be one of the candidates in 1992. And so they made it. They brought Hillary Clinton and Wild Bill Clinton together at Yale. Clinton normally couldn't have gone to Yale. He didn't have the background to be in Yale. Yale is an institution, a small institution at that, for the wealthy of the country. They don't bring no poor cracker like Bush into Yale unless they got a reason for it. Like Clinton. Unless they got a reason for it. They had a reason why they made him a Rhodes Scholar. Why they gave him those credentials. Why they sent him to Georgetown. They had a reason before it happened. Otherwise, he would have been down to Arkansas State Teachers College. We talk about critical thinking now. You got to put two and two together and try to figure this out. But the American policy, people say, well, you know, it looks like Bush. It looks like Bush is out. And Clinton is going to be a different white man. I like all them appointments that he done made. All them black faces. Boy, I like that. Epsy, Ron Brown, Vernon Jordan, head of the transition team. I like all that. Today he was in church, in a black church for the first time in the history of America. That is bad news, brothers and sisters. That's bad news. That's a Machiavellian move. That means that we are getting ready to be the next dinner on that table. Let's get real. It's going to be worse than screwed this time. We wish we were just screwed. Ain't no more screwing. What is the difference between Jimmy Carter, George Bush, and Bill Clinton? Nothing but the last names. Nothing. Why? Because they all are committed to promoting white supremacy policies. Reason we don't discuss policy because we don't have any policy. What is our policy on trade? None. You talking about a trade deficit, we're it. 95 cents of every dollar leaves our community in 24 hours. You talking about an economic imbalance. We're it. What are we doing to correct our economic imbalance? Nothing. What kind of central banking system do we have? None. What kind of trade are we engaged in? None. What markets do we control? None. White folks just wrote in the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was December 31st, about how so glad they were that y'all was celebrating Kwanzaa. It's a big market that they intend to control. People go to war over trade. The only thing you doing is buying your boys toy guns. And then when they get of age and realize it doesn't work, they want a real gun. And because their minds are bad, they start shooting the first thing they see, which is us. Because we're celebrating Christmas. And now they realize that we don't control this Kwanzaa market. And so Hallmark cars and J.C. Penney and all of these other Toys R Us and everybody else are getting ready to swoop down on us. And we have no trade associations, no organizations to defend ourselves. White folks commercialize everything. Women, anything. Madonna is all over the world creating a white culture. Got Negroes in Africa waiting to get to a white woman. One newspaper article said that, and this is one of the best lines I've heard, that Madonna looks like a whore and thinks like a pimp. Global white supremacy. Everybody in the world now beginning to speak English. a satanic language. Nobody who speaks English can liberate themselves. Nobody. Your submission to the satanic language alone colonizes your mind. Colonizes your mind. Global white supremacy. Every country now must submit and install English as a global racist language. And that's what it is. A racist language. So this whole thing, this whole process, from culture to language to markets, all of it has been outlined to rules of law to keep them in check. And who are some of the culprits? One of them is the Trilateral Commission. Financed by the Rockefeller family. And who have been former members of the Trilateral Commission? Jimmy Carter, George Bush, and Bill Clinton. And you're talking about there's a difference between Clinton and Bush. You don't know anything about policy. One of the greatest things white folks taught me to do background checks. Y'all don't do no background check. If you pop up with Whitey, the first thing he does, we got to do a background check. But I do the same thing. I brought some of my evidence right here tonight after conducting background checks to see what we're dealing with. If you haven't done a background check, you shouldn't be discussing somebody. And so when you began to look at white supremacy and what strengthens white supremacy, think tanks. You know, Bush and Carter and Clinton and nobody is versatile enough to know every subject. We're the only ones that know everything and don't know nothing. Only thing we got to do is name a Negro a leader and we allow him to speak on everything. Everything. What do you think about that? Blah, blah, blah. What do you think about that? Blah, blah, blah. White folks deal differently. So when you begin to understand what are the policies of the Republicans, what are the policies of the Democrats, who shape their policies, you got to be able to identify the think tanks. Who shapes the Republican policy? The Hoover Institution, Stanford University, the Center for Strategic International Studies at Georgetown University, the Heritage Foundation, financed by the Coors family. And they also sponsored the Dr. M.L. King Parade in Atlanta this weekend. The Coors family, one of the most right-wing families in the world. The Hudson Institute, people like Alexander Haig and others have been a part of the Hudson Institute out in Indianapolis. They're trying to get Quayle to come out there now after he leaves office. You got to begin to understand who shapes their policy. The Democratic think tanks, the Brookings Institute, about all these crackers publications. The Brookings Review. Now, guess who among others is on the board of the trustees of the Brookings Institute? Now, this is supposed to be the granddaddy of think tanks. First, David Rockefeller Jr. Secondly, Donald E. Shalala, whatever that witch's name is. Thirdly is Donald F. McHenry, UN ambassador, on the board of directors of Coca-Cola, one of the ruling multinational corporations in the world. The French farmers right now are destroying every Coca-Cola sign in France because they want them to submit to GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, to destroy farming in France. America wants to be the world's breadbasket and using food as a weapon. That's why Africa is starving today, because all of the grain is controlled by American corporations. They tricked you, told you were too slick to be on the farm, told you ought to be in the city. And y'all jumped on the first freight train you could get on, going north. We had 926,000 farms in the 1920s. Today we have less than 23,000. Acreage, we had more than 30 million acres of land in the 20s. Today we have less than 3 million. And nobody understands the science of agriculture in our community today. How many children do you know who study agricultural science? Nobody. So you are thoroughly at the mercy of crackers. And this is why they put Mac Epps in charge of agriculture. Every time they put a Negro in charge of an agency, we have 4 or 5 heads of housing. Then we don't have no homes. We're homeless. Now they got a Negro in agriculture. You won't get any food in the next few days. You'll be Somalia. You're looking at Somalia every night when you look at these pictures, because you look at yourself. That's why you're headed. Because you can't produce any food. Because you gave up the basic things that any people would never surrender. The ability to grow crops, but you were too slick. You had to be in New York. You had to be in Chicago, Philadelphia. You used to be the builder. You ain't building nothing now. White folks propaganda beat you again. So it got you off these farms. George Washington Carver came down here right there. He beat all of us with a stick. What was the significance of George Washington Carver? It wasn't the fact that he made many uses out of peanuts. That wasn't the reason. George Washington Carver went to the crackers in the South and told them that the continuous planting of cotton is going to bring about soil erosion. He was one of the original environmentalists. White folks didn't understand that. And he said, use peanuts and let up off the soil so that the soil can continue to nurture itself. And he gave them all of those uses for the peanut. But you disband that. And the founder member of the Brookings Institute, this shows you why he's now prominent in the Clinton administration. Vernon Jordan sits on the board of trustees of the Brookings Institute. Now, what is interesting about all of these Negroes is that all of these Negroes were controlled by foundations. They brought them up. Vernon Jordan was brought up through the foundations. The Rockefeller Foundation brought him up. The Urban League and the NAACP financed by Rockefeller and Ford. When the Latinos, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, was set up in the late 60s, the Ford Foundation set it up for them. They said, you need a legal defense fund. Why? Because we can control the issues that you raise and make sure that you won't go nowhere that you shouldn't be. We don't need no more Malcolm X. We look at these foundations. Why do they like this woman marrying Wright Elderman? Not because she's married to a white man, because she was brought up by the Rockefeller Foundation. They own the Children's Defense Fund. When I went to Haiti, what I found interesting was when we got to Miami, they looked at us like we had the bubonic plague. Haitians are not defining Haitian policy. Blacks are not defining Haitian policy. The Haiti Refugee Center, which is their legal arm, is owned by the Ford Foundation. That's why the Haitians are being sent back to Haiti, because white folks are setting policy for black folks. The one thing that blacks do not do in America is set policy. Black politicians is just like black athletes. They don't do them to run up and down the court. And at the appropriate time, they endorse a product. Negroes, politicians, well, I endorse Abrams. I endorse Cuomo. I endorse Andy Stein. That's the only role they have, the same as athletes. Should be in sneakers. We're not setting any policy at all. And so as we began to look at all of this, just in conclusion, the Progressive Policy Institute, Bill Clinton's think tank. If you want to find out what Bill Clinton really thinks, get their documents. That's what people do. We don't have a think tank. That's why we don't have any policy. That's why we try to have these programs at the slave theater to begin to move us in that area. We got to begin to formulate how to think critically and think analytically and how to bring together the information in order for us to make that decision. And so, as we conclude, this is the current issue of foreign affairs. They don't buy this, they don't have this in the hood. This is not sold in the hood. This document here, this magazine, is published by the Council on Foreign Relations. Current issue. And what they say is this: the primary problem in America and in the world is the population threat. Primary problem in the world. And they say that we must stem fertility rates and control migration. Council on Foreign Relations. That's what these crackers are talking about. And they say right in here that Clinton is their horse. This is Clinton's agenda. Global 2000. Formulated by the Carter administration. Still functioning in the Carter Center in Atlanta right now to destroy all non-white people. Global 2000. Financed by a guy by the name of Jack Stevens, who brought the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International to America. He was the main financial supporter of Bill Clinton. And BCCI has financed Global 2000. The Bank of Crooks and Criminals International. Has financed it. And the man that brought BCCI to America was the main fundraiser for Bill Clinton. These are Machiavellian moves that they are moving on you. Because they know your weaknesses. They know because of your lack of self-esteem, you want to see black faces in high places. And they are exploiting that. And then they have an article here about Colin Powell. He talks about how America must be able and prepared to move on minutes' notice. Must have what he calls a base force to move on anybody who is threatening American interests. Colin Powell. And so when we began to look at all of this, we got to get deeper into our thought process, into what is happening to us, and understand very clearly. And I end with a quote at the end of the population threat. This is the final words. He writes, "Hell is truth seen too late, duty neglected in its season." Let me read that again. Hell is truth seen too late, duty neglected in its season. What they're saying is that the time for the destruction of us is now. And that if they fail to carry out their duty in this season, they will be committed to hell. All right? This article was written by Michael Tenenbaum. So when we began to talk about global white supremacy, we're talking about a serious subject that can really be carried into a very long symposium in terms of our conditions and our predicament. And so as we look at that truth, we look at that quotation. You know why this quotation is so relevant? Because Malcolm warned us in season. But truth seen too late is hell. Duty neglected in its season. You got to act in season. See, you can't wait 20-something years and say, well, you know, Malcolm was right. It's too late for Malcolm. That's why you can't follow dead people, because you should have followed him then, in season. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the house back over to Chief Imhotep Gary Bird.
In the tradition of our ancestors, I will first ask permission of my elders to speak, if they will just note this by hand, please. I'm experiencing a rather unusual thing in operating more and more in tradition. Occasionally I walk into a room and I am perfectly prepared to say that I will wait for permission from my elders to speak, and I turn out to be the oldest person in the room. It has happened on occasion. Now, I wouldn't admit that to Reverend Al Sharpton, but it does indeed occur. In the name of the ancestors in whose footsteps we walk and upon whose ideas we fly, I greet you. And I welcome you into, as Brother Alton Maddox has indicated, a symposium that really can go on and on and on and on, because the subject is that deep, this subject of global white supremacy. And I know that we had the inauguration today, or they had the inauguration today. And I know that there are some brothers and sisters who think that global white supremacy ended today when Bush stepped down. But my television set operates in color in my bedroom, and I have an old one that I keep that's in black and white. And Clinton and Gore look white on both sets. So I think we can presume and assume that global white supremacy is still in order here in these United States of America in spite of the election of Bill Clinton as president. They still look white to me. Last night, there was a party on television. I don't know how many of you saw it. You saw the party on Channel 4 last night? They had a presidential party. At one point, they had an R&B segment, and they had Chuck Berry and Little Richard. You know, and Chuck Berry's daughter was blowing the harmonica and the whole thing. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I can get into this part. And as soon as I kind of got comfortable with it, they cut it off. I said, well, that's an accident. How'd they do that? They cut that too quick. Then I saw Bill Cosby come up with the horn of Dizzy Gillespie. And he introduced some of the greatest jazz giants of all time. Illinois Jacquette, Herbie Hancock, a whole stage full, Wynton Marsalis. And they began to play, and I actually ran to one of my son's bedrooms because he plays trumpet, and I woke him up. I said, young blood, you got to wake up and come and check this out, because these are the legends about to blow. And so I got him in position, and I said, I'll run downstairs and get me a drink, because I want to catch all these solos that they're going to move off into. Because this is America's classical music that we are talking about here. America's only classical music that we are talking about here. So I run downstairs and I grabbed a drink and I ran back upstairs and the commercial was on. And I was puzzled. I said, well, now wait a minute. My house ain't that big. I went downstairs. That was 15 seconds. I came back up in 15. They just cut those brothers off like that. Brothers tell me they cut Illinois Jacquette's Flying Home Solo out. They just cut it out. Okay. They let Aretha sing one song. Barbara Streisand sang 3. She sang, the first signal that you had to how long she was going to sing is when you realized that they brought a teapot on stage for her to drink tea while she performed. Indication she going to be here for a while. Remember, they cut off the classic R&B. They cut off the classic jazz. This is a presidential party, folks. And then something real strange happened. The Alvin Ailey Dance Theater was announced. I said, whoa, okay. I know they're going to come with some roots. And they came out in front of 2 Southern white men and took it to the plantation with a buck dance. You had to stop. At one point I said, this is going to change somewhere in here and it's going to get serious. The chains are going to come out or something and they're going to make this thing relevant. And man, one brother looked like he had put some extra teeth in his mouth to do that kind of cheesy kind of grin thing. And when they finished, they bowed. Man, I was in shock. I said, what is this? They're celebrating Dixieland for real. This is real. Now, I remember when Reagan and Bush were elected. And I remember that I was down in Dallas, man. They sent us down to cover the Republican convention in Dallas. And I saw a sign that I never saw anywhere in the country. It said, Reagan, Bush, bringing America back. That's an interesting sign. Back to what? We found out. So now, somehow last night, I got the impression that we were about to go back in time. And some brothers and sisters don't know it. But see, what's happened is we went into a new phase. It's like time travel. We go back in time and forward in time at the same time. So somewhere on stage was a white child being held by a black man named Michael Jackson, and he was whiter than the child. He was whiter than a whole row of white people who was sitting in front of him. I'm not saying it to be funny. It's for real. He was whiter than the white people. And we act like it's normal. This brother did something to himself that we have never seen. We've seen it happen mentally. We have made that adjustment. He did it physically. His lips disappeared. He does not have lips anymore. It's like this. This requires surgery. The skin requires operations. At one point in Europe, Michael's nose was about to fall off. I'm not saying that for a joke. That's real. I was there. He was looking for a doctor because the nose had begun to cave in. Now, I don't know. And he got a lot of time to perform that night at the party. And everybody loved the whole performance, and he was talking about saving the world. And Michael, you got to save yourself. You got to save yourself. And we have a responsibility to save ourselves. Now, we look at the party last night, and as far as I could tell, Haitians still can't get into the party. Did you hear what I said? The Haitians still can't get into the party. They still blocked out. The same president who said, when I am elected president, there will be no Haitian problem. What did the other president say? Read my lips. Now, when somebody tells you to read their lips, and you hear what they say, and then they don't do that, they have done a very interesting thing. they have told you that they don't believe that you can read. They said, read my lips. They can't read. They ain't worried about that. Let us be clear, folks. It's not taking an awful lot of time for us to see through this window, to see through this illusion. There is only reality. And we are still in a position where we have to understand that power concedes nothing without a demand. And there is only one thing that will defeat global white supremacy. One thing will defeat global white supremacy: a united African movement. Now, we have tried forced integration, assimilation. We have tried complacency. We've tried to say, well, maybe there's a way to get comfortable with this. You ever tried to like sleep in a car or something? And you say, there's some way I can do this, and you just never ever really work it out though. You're uncomfortable as long as you're in there trying to sleep. We have tried insanity. We have just went crazy and said, I'll just be crazy. That ain't worked either. We have even said, I'll be militant. I heard something amazing at one point when I was about to go to Ghana, because there were some people who were trying to usurp the current president, President Jerry Rawlings, who, from what I can tell, has a very progressive, forward-minded consciousness. I said, well, explain to me, to a brother from Ghana, what at least some of the opposition is. And he says, well, I can't speak about all of them. He said, but he named a couple who I'll leave nameless because they are. But he said, Bert, he said, it's a different kind of thing. He said, it's like, militant Uncle Toms. See, we've dealt with Uncle Toms before, but we haven't made the adjustment to the fact that we even have militant Uncle Toms. Clarence Thomas is a militant Uncle Tom. And in the end, it's not going to work for him either. I'm trying to say now, we've tried everything. Brothers and sisters have moved in every kind of angle. We have been niggas. We have been coloreds. We have been mulattoes. We have been Negroes and blacks. Isn't it astounding that last night at that party that it took a Latino brother to walk to center stage and say, I am African first. Do you understand that you have never seen that scene take place on your screen on nationwide television? This has never happened. What's this brother's name? James what? Almost. Okay, James Almost. He's an actor. Well, okay, so we've done all these things and we still refusing to deal with this point, while we have questioned over these hundreds of years who or what we are. The Irish, the Italians, the Koreans, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians. I can't say the Jews. Do you know why? Because they are not an ethnic group. Did you hear what I just said? They are not an ethnic group. They practice a religion. We need to be clear that somehow we have allowed ourselves to be fooled into thinking that a group of particular Europeans who have adopted a religion are actually an ethnic group. So we may say Irish, Italians, Koreans, and Jews. No, you don't do that. That is a particular group of Europeans who are practicing a religion which originates in Africa and which is practiced in Asia and countries around the world. They are not an ethnic group. So we've seen all of these ethnic groups progress by creating a political, economic, and educational structure built around their own specific culture. They are not ashamed. That's why you can go to Little Italy. You can go to Chinatown. You can go to a Japanese restaurant, Korean restaurant. It's no problem. They take pride in their culture and they understand that that is where their liberation lies. When Japan was leveled, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, do you think that they came out of that by somehow looking at a white image of Jesus and asking him to save them? Are you a fool? That's why they have the house of the rising sun, because they went inside to their own God and they emerged victorious, and that God looks like them and that God operates in their own image. In Ghana, I came out of Abidjan and saw white Jesuses everywhere. Man, I saw Jesus so white that I thought they had created some new chemical to create whiteness, because I've never seen Jesus so white in my life. It was like you said, oh my God, how did they do that? And by the time I got to Ghana, I had seen Santa Claus in Abidjan. Now, as far as I know, it doesn't snow in West Africa. And this Santa Claus had his full outfit on and his beard and his whole thing, and I guess he was going to bring the reindeer down on the snow. What are we talking about here? What are these images? This is global white supremacy. We got to be clear about this. Isn't it interesting that it is only when we begin to beat the drums of our own culture that we become racist, radical, and anti-Semitic? What could possibly be wrong with wanting the best for your own people? Tell me what's wrong with that. Somebody tell me what's wrong with it. But yet somehow we're supposed to believe that we can be a better people, more humane, if we somehow engage in actions that ultimately only show hate and disrespect for ourselves, our people, and our ancestors. Somebody thinks that you are crazy. We talk about culture. I discovered something some time back that was created by Dr. Maulana Karenga. And a peculiar thing happened to me. It's like every year Kwanzaa would come up, you know, and I'd be scrambling around like everybody, trying to get to Kanara and to get to this and get to that. And, you know, I started catching up with myself, and I did a couple of Kwanzaas. And I said, man, the feeling was so beautiful. 7 days of Kwanzaa, and then it was sort of like, okay, now, you out there now, here's the whole year. And after about 2 years of this, I said, I don't understand this. if these 7 principles and this practice works so well and brings your family so together over 7 days at the end of the year, why don't we do this every day? Why aren't we practicing these principles every day? Why aren't we teaching ourselves these principles every day? And hence I began a process of doing this every day on my radio show, as most of you know. Umoja is what? Excuse me? Excuse me? It's striving for, maintaining unity in the family, the community, the nation, and the race. Kujichagulia is what? Defining ourselves, naming ourselves, creating for ourselves, speaking for ourselves instead of being defined, named, created, and spoken for by others. Ujima is what? Say it with me. Collective work and responsibility. Building and maintaining our community together and making our sisters and brothers' problems our problems, and understanding that we can solve our problems together. Try and tell me that there's some problem that this whole room full of us can't solve. That's impossible. Ujamaa. Cooperative economics. Can I hear you? Building, maintaining our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and learning to profit from them together. Why not? Everybody else has come into your community and profited off you. Why can't we profit off of ourselves? This is simple, basic logic. Nia. Making our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore ourselves and our people to their traditional greatness. This greatness is not something new to our people. Our story does not begin with global white supremacy. So greatness isn't something new to our people. Greatness is the legacy of our people. Kuumba. Creativity. Now it says doing always as much as we can in every way that we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited it. I know that most of you by now have seen the litany of inventions that brothers and sisters have invented over the years. I mean, it's all around you. It's lawnmowers, it's traffic lights. I mean, we can go from now we can go from now until midnight with nothing but inventions. But do you know how many companies have become rich off things that were created in the mind of the black man? What happens if we begin to apply that creativity to our own community to benefit ourselves? We're the most creative people on the planet. But we got to use the power of creativity for ourselves and for the development of our people. The principle of imani. We always talk about this principle and say that it's the most important principle of all, and there are a lot of reasons for that. It's believing with all of our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our elders, our ancestors, and the righteousness and the victory of our struggle under God. Do you understand that if you don't believe you can win, you are already gone? It's lost. It's all over with. So when we talk about this battle that the brothers who are going to be speaking of tonight, and what you heard of Brother Attorney Maddox speak about, You got to believe that you can win. If you don't believe you can defeat global white supremacy, then it will prevail. Have you ever been in an athletic situation and maybe you were dealing with some players and all of a sudden you realize that they thought that they couldn't win? It's over with. Game is done. It's, hey, you might as well not even play. Because you got to believe you can win in order to win. Think about those brothers and sisters who were in slavery. Take a look at those brothers who escaped from the plantation and who go north and get the guns. And then they're coming back. Now the story that you hear from the media is that Lincoln freed the slaves. Okay? The story that you hear is all about how the, quote, North won the war. But I want you to be clear that when you start counting the 39 decisive battles that win for the North, and you will find African Americans at all of those battles. But what were those brothers going to do? This is our perspective issue, how we look at history, how we look at ourselves. They weren't going into the South to fight for the North. They were going to the South to free their families. This is the greatest story never told. They left. They went. They took the guns and freed the towns, and it's documented. What were they asking? Have you seen Thelma Jones? Have you seen Sister such and such? Have you seen it? Because they were going to liberate their families. These are our ancestors that we're talking about. This is what they did. We have to celebrate the victory. Now, brothers and sisters, I just came from an experience in which a lot of tradition has been laid on me. I came through an experience that was led into by an experience with one of our guests on stage who laid out the groundwork for me to go where I went. And when I went, and when I began to perceive the loss of tradition and culture that we have come to experience, my heart sank. You can only begin to experience what has happened to us when you recognize that here we are in this room. Who's sitting next to you? Somebody said it. Brothers and sisters, have you touched? Have you shook each other's hand? Do it. That's the African tradition. Look at each other. White people have us in a position where we come and take a seat, and man, we looking straight ahead. Whoever that is next to me, I don't know who that is, that's whatever that is. It's not like that. One Africa, one family. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. You can't walk into a room in Ghana and not be introduced to everybody within 10 minutes you've touched each other. You can't do that. We're a family. And we've lost some valuable traditions. But one of the things that I experienced in Ghana, and part of why we went for Panafest to celebrate the re-emergence of African civilization. Now that's the re-emergence. Because it's been here before, but it's re-emerging again. And it's re-emerging because there are brothers and sisters who have taken the time to find out about the diamonds in our own backyard. There's a story. An African had a farm, and he kept hearing about people who were going further down south on the continent and getting all these diamonds. And the stories were coming back about how rich everybody was getting and so forth. So finally he decided that he'll sell his farm and go looking for these diamonds. So he sold his farm and he split. He looked year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and it was 13 years. Didn't find a single diamond. He sat down one day on the beach, put his head down, and died. Meanwhile, back at his farm, which had been purchased, they were out digging in the back. They found this big old rock. I said, what is this thing? Guy took it, had it appraised. They said, where did you get this? He said, well, I got it from my backyard. He said, this is one of the most valuable diamonds I have ever seen. Take me where this place is. When they took him, they reached in the ground. Man, the diamonds were everywhere. He became a very wealthy man immediately. Let's think back to the African who left home and went away for 13 years looking somewhere else for diamonds when the diamonds were in his own backyard. Now, I have come to understand the value of that metaphoric story in a very different and unique way. Sometimes it's not material or mineral wealth that we are talking about. Sometimes these diamonds reveal themselves in a way that isn't totally clear to us. In the context of tradition, as a king, as a chief, I will not go into certain territories and not stop to pay my respects to certain elders, to certain individuals, kings and whatnot, because they have earned that respect. We have come to the point where in that loss of tradition, we have lost the definition factor of what becomes a king or a queen or a chief or whatever. I want you to understand that I am no more king or chief than attorney Alton Maddox is right here at the Slave Theater. People get confused about what a king does and the responsibilities of a chief and what is a stool. What this brother is doing is what a king does. Diamonds in your own backyard. If I go to see a king and I go to his court and I see his village and I hear his particular rules and ideology and where he's leading his people, hence I give him a particular respect as being a king. Alton Maddox is a king. He is a king. In the African tradition, he is a king. Nana, for most people, means chief. Because they hear my African name, Nana, Kwabena, Toku, and Pamazi. These are two names because I received installments in two different areas. But Nana means ancestor. That is what the word means. And the stool of the Akan, unlike any other level of ancestor worship that we see around the world, the stool is the vehicle for Nana to communicate with the ancestors. So that Nana, or the chief or king, becomes a person who is in touch with the ancestors and who reveals to us what the ancestors want us to do, what the ancestors are saying to us. We have some very, very special people in our experience. We have people who are in touch with the ancestors in a very special way that we experience sort of unofficially, and who begin to lead us out of the darkness of global white supremacy And in many instances, we don't even know who they really are. It's like an African by the name of Jesus Christ who might put a African by the name of Jesus Christ. Make sure now, okay? Puts a cloak on and kind of walks into an area, and he's dressed however he's dressed, and hey, man, people, if he walked into church, they'd probably throw him out. But he can walk in and he can work his magic. He'll do what he does. Calls upon the power of God to do the things that have to be done. Well, okay, there's a place for us in our minds, mythologically, to work with that. But where we have our trouble, brothers and sisters, is that we have not yet learned to give, and I count myself in this, the greatest level of respect and the elevation of those living ancestors who are with us today as we speak. Dr. John Henrik Clarke is one of those ancestors. This is real. This is real. This is real. This is real. This is a brother who has a lot of choices, but who made a particular choice. This kind of choice is one that is spiritual as well as cultural and historical. And hence, we have to make sure that we give these particular ancestors, elders, nana, all the support that they need. And that we elevate them to their rightful place on the throne in our community. Now, when Dr. Clarke goes tonight into the story that he'll go into, the story of how we operate inside of this spectrum of global white supremacy, he'll reveal characters to us. And there's another brother who will begin to talk to us about where these characters are coming from. It's hard to understand your enemy if you don't understand where your enemy is coming from. Why they think the way they do. Why they move the way they do. What makes them tick, so to speak. As Brother Alton Maddox said, a background check. And when we talk about this area of psychology, this area of getting into the mind, it's not simply an intellectual exercise. It takes some other kind of going inside of yourself to call upon those ancestors who are there to give you the power of analysis that moves beyond Eurocentric training to take you into the depth of that particular character that you are talking about, whether it be the European or whether it be the African. We are blessed to have him with us tonight, Dr. Amos Wilson. The battle, as you heard tonight, in the world today is the battle to see who will control the resources of the African race. Those resources are intellectual. Those resources are mineral. Those resources are physical. Those resources are cultural. You heard Brother Alton Maddox speak. We generate, and I checked it today just to get the exact number, an estimated annual income of $294 billion. $294 billion. We go to more movies, watch more TV, drink more sodas, and ultimately dominate more product categories than we will ever represent by population. But what has happened? What has happened is that we still do not yet see ourselves. We don't see what Adam Clayton Powell talked about, that the power is in our hands. And we allow ourselves to be manipulated through the media to ultimately see only the worst of ourselves. WLIB is under target, myself in particular, principally because something happened that they didn't expect to occur. We became the tribal drum in the global village. And what has happened is that suddenly I can travel, and I travel around the world. And I'm shocked when I walk into brothers and sisters anywhere I go, and I'll just be saying my name casually. Say, oh yeah, GBE. GBE. What's happening, brother? How you know about this show? Oh, well, you know, I got the tapes. You know, my cousin goes to New York, and he brings the tapes back, and then we send them to here, and we send them to there. They didn't expect this to occur. And what has happened is communications is a major frontline battleground in global white supremacy. You are not supposed to look at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Marcus Garvey in the same picture. You are not supposed to know that any of them had any relationship to each other or that they had anything positive to say about each other. And so you will miss all the quotes that Martin Luther King Jr. made concerning Marcus Messiah Garvey. You will not really note that towards the point of his death that Malcolm X and Martin were beginning to come together. You will miss it. You will miss the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King had a little bit more to say about life than the "I have a dream" speech. These are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who talks about what black people have to do to come together. He says Negroes are almost instinctively cohesive. We band together readily, and against white hostility, we have an intense and wholesome loyalty to each other. In some of the simplest relationships, we will protect a brother even at a cost to ourselves. We are loath to be witnesses against each other when the white man seeks to divide us. We are acutely conscious of the need and sharply sensitive to the importance of defending our own. Solidarity is a reality in Negro life as it has always been among the oppressed. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is misapplied when we confuse high status with high character. There are already structured forces in the Negro community that can serve as the basis for building a powerful united front. The Negro Church, the Negro Press, the Negro fraternities and sororities, and the Negro professional associations. We must admit that these forces have never been given their full resources to the cause of Negro liberation. These are Dr. King's words. There are still too many Negro churches that are so absorbed in a future good over yonder that they condition their members to adjust to the present evils over here. Too many Negro newspapers have veered away from their traditional role as protest organs agitating for social change and have turned to the sensational and the conservative in place of the substantive and the militant. Too many Negro social and professional groups have degenerated into snobbishness and a preoccupation with frivolities and trivial activity. But the failures of the past must not be an excuse for the inaction of the present and the future. These groups must be mobilized and motivated. This form of group unity can do infinitely more to liberate the Negro than any action of individuals. We have been oppressed as a group, and we must overcome that oppression as a group. That's Dr. Martin Luther King. That's the King you don't hear on TV. That's the King you don't get on your radio station. We have to break it down, brothers and sisters, and we are certainly, as I say again, very fortunate to have two of the best in this particular issue to do it for us. Global white supremacy. Keep in mind a very simple thing. We can win if we believe we can win. Thank you.
Imhotep Gary Bird. Imhotep Gary Bird.